Tsaghkadzor and Myler, Two Resorts in Conversation. Article by Maria Gunko. Published on January 30, 2026 on EVN Reports Lifestyle Magazine, SALT. Heel to toe, 1, 2, 3. A preschool rhyme is playing in my head as I glide on my white snowboard down the white slopes. Isn't it a privilege that ski resorts in Armenia are only an hour away from Yerevan, making it possible to arrange a retreat on every day off? And now this ease has more than one point of reference. Tsaghkadzor and Myler, the two ski resorts in Armenia, stand in consequential dialogue with one another. They are not competitors in the aggressive sense, at least not yet. No billboards announce their rivalry. No loyalty programs demand exclusivity. And yet, their coexistence has already altered the terrain, both materially and symbolically. Tsaghkadzor, long the country's unquestioned winter destination, and Myler, the newest arrival, represent two distinct temporal orientations. One is shaped by continuity, the other by anticipation. For decades, Tsaghkadzor was where winter sports happened. It did not need to persuade. It simply existed. Built in the late Soviet period and incrementally updated after independence, the resort developed through accumulation. Infrastructure was added when needed, hotels rose where demand appeared, and services expanded organically. The town gathers densely around the slopes, hotels stacked closely against one another. Interiors lean toward visual abundance, heavy furniture, warm lighting, thick carpets that soften sound and movement. Lobbies smell of coffee and heated air. The slopes are dominated by groups of Armenian men in dark attire who descend quickly and loudly, leaving brief chaos in their wake, as well as by foreigners, easily discernible by their funkier, more colorful ski resort fashion. Occasional families with children in mismatched helmets pause frequently, negotiating speed and fear. Instructors in identical attire repeat the same jokes, the same warnings, and the same encouragement. At the bottom of the ropeway, another category of visitors gathers among the skiers and snowboarders, those who came just to observe. Wrapped in lavish fur coats and leather jackets, men and women ride the cable cars upward, then descend the same way several minutes or hours later. For them, the mountain is a viewing platform rather than terrain to be traversed. Tsaghkadzor accommodates this without friction. Participation is flexible. I have been snowboarding at Tsaghkadzor since January 2023. It may not be the best ski resort I've visited, but it's close and reliable. The experience unfolds predictably. I know where I'll eat and stay overnight, how long the line for the ski lift will be, and where I'll get my après-ski apéral. Over time, ritual replaced discovery. Expectations were modest. Tsaghkadzor was robust in delivering the bare minimum. Predictability and post-Soviet obsolescence were not perceived as major drawbacks, since the nearest alternatives lay 7 to 8 hours away by car, across the border in Georgia. Myler disrupted the equilibrium simply by emerging. New, with better infrastructure and still sparsely built, it hasn't yet settled into routine. You don't arrive in a town, but at a development site, a work in progress. Glass, clean lines, and uncluttered interiors dominate. Space is still allowed to breathe. There's less reassurance and more to discover. The surroundings feel curated, but not yet softened by use. Technical details matter. Enclosed gondola lifts prevent face and limbs from freezing during the ascent, unlike Tsaghkadzor's exposed upper chairlift. Snow cannons promise consistently white slopes throughout the season. New gear for rent and comfortable personal lockers reduce the practical inconveniences of the experience. The social composition mirrors the atmosphere. Myler attracts people drawn to novelty, to aesthetics, and the promise of something emerging. Fewer visitors come purely for the view. More arrive with equipment, purpose, and expectation. More are attuned to the global ski resort culture. Conversations often drift toward comparison, to Gudari, to alpine destinations, to imagined futures of Armenian winter tourism. There's a sense of participation in a project rather than attendance at a tradition. And yet, Myler's newness is also its fragility. The project was developed not without frictions and contestations, including complaints from residents of nearby villages and concerns about how the resort was planned and built near Yegipatrush. Services are still calibrating. Après-ski culture remains more of an aspiration than a lived practice. Options are limited, social spaces are few, and the rhythm of the resort leaves little room for evening parties, as in Tsaghkadzor, though, then again, no one expected après-ski parties here. Prices feel elevated, sometimes testing the limits of local expectations. Questions of economic and cultural accessibility hover without clear answers. Myler probably would not have been possible without growing dissatisfaction with the status quo. Tsaghkadzor can no longer rely entirely on inevitability. The presence of a nearby alternative makes its stagnation visible. Infrastructure that once felt good enough ages differently when comparison becomes possible. Service standards, slope management, and design choices are no longer judged solely by local memory. They're measured against a domestic counterpart with a different aesthetic. The mountain must now be actively maintained rather than passively relied upon. At the same time, Myler cannot remain suspended in the romance of newness. Novelty fades quickly. A resort built on distinction must eventually prove it can sustain repetition. Return, attachment, and community cannot be imported wholesale. They must be cultivated. The rivalry, such as it is, remains understated. No one is forced to choose sides, but the effect is real. Users become more attentive and discerning. Leisure becomes a matter of choice rather than inheritance. Expectations shift. The mountain landscape itself begins to host multiple futures instead of a singularity. But the most important change is not infrastructural, but cultural. Armenia now has a winter leisure landscape that invites juxtaposition and critique. Two resorts in conversation force both sides to evolve. Change is no longer optional. It is essential and will inevitably be mutual.